Story 1. I'm 26 years old and reside in a townhome situated in the outskirts of a small city. My job involves closing shifts, typically wrapping up around 10 or 11 p.m., and I spend most of my time at home, gaming with my friends late into the night. Each day felt rather repetitive. A few months ago, during a particularly stressful work week, I wasn't really feeling social and didn't have any desire to hang out with my friends or log into my games that night. However, sleep wasn't coming easy either. I found myself wide awake until 2 a.m., mindlessly watching YouTube videos, before I decided to take a break and go for a walk. I don't walk often, but when I do, I find it soothing and enjoyable. I can't figure out why I didn't do it more frequently, especially at night when the streets were quiet. Being out there felt like I had the town all to myself, which sounds a tad eerie, but I liked it. Well, at least I used to. After grabbing a hoodie and locking my place, I set out for a stroll. I didn't have a plan for how far or how long I would go, so I began heading the usual way, passing through the townhome area and making my way into the neighborhood with regular houses. The houses around here weren't anything special. Most were older, crowded together, and not too appealing. Still, it was better than wandering around the townhomes. As I walked, it felt like the entire town was asleep. Every house I passed was dark and silent, and there were no sounds at all. For a little while, the peace settled around me and was precisely what I needed to decompress. However, after some time, I noticed I hadn't turned at all. I'd been walking straight down the same road, which led me further out to the edges. Suddenly, the street transformed into a narrower road bordered by much more spaced-out houses within a heavily wooded area. Since almost all the houses were unlit except the odd porch light, I couldn't quite make them out as they lay hidden among the trees beyond the dim light illuminating the road. Though the atmosphere felt quite different from where I had just been walking, I was intrigued enough to keep going. About half a mile in, I was startled by a scream. It belonged to a male voice and had a tone that didn't suggest distress, more like a call to grab someone's attention. It was difficult to accurately judge, though, and with the eerie silence of the surroundings, the voice seemed to echo through the forest, as if coming from all directions. I paused, listening, but saw nothing. After about 30 seconds, I decided to keep moving. I didn't know what I had just heard, but I also felt like figuring it out would be pointless, so I dismissed it. Beyond the scream, the street gave me an unsettled feeling the farther I ventured. It seemed like the streetlights grew dimmer and spaced out more, while the houses I caught glimpses of appeared older and in disrepair. They seemed abandoned, and the road itself was starting to look unkempt, like it hadn't been visited in ages. I knew the financial situation of this part of town wasn't great. After all, I was struggling too, but I had no idea that this section even existed. As I continued examining the surroundings, it began to feel like I was walking through a wholly deserted neighborhood, and that made me uncomfortable late at night. Then I heard the scream again. It was similar to the previous one, but it sounded nearer this time, almost as if it came from behind me. I froze and turned around. The streetlights barely illuminated the path back. The stillness of everything heightened my anxiety. Every small noise in the dark made me think someone might be there. I realized I was becoming paranoid, and part of me knew I should just leave. Unsure about how far the road led, or if it looped back to my neighborhood, I understood the wisest choice was to retrace my steps. The problem remained, though, the source of the screaming. Still, I turned around, my focus on the road as I hurried to exit the wooded area. A few minutes into my hurried retreat, I heard the scream once again, but this time it was coming from behind me, right where I had come from. Whoever it was, I must have passed them by, meaning they must have been concealed somewhere in the woods. When I glanced back, I spotted a man standing on the road. Dressed in dark clothing, he was approaching me. I oriented my gaze just for a heartbeat before I whipped around and quickened my pace down the road. Something about the situation felt wrong, and I sensed that lingering too long might lead to something terrible happening. I scanned behind me multiple times afterward, even after having seen him approach before, but somehow he'd vanished. It struck me as odd. Perhaps he noticed me turning around and took the chance to backtrack, hoping to avoid looking like he was chasing me. which made sense considering the creepy context of the area we were in. Whatever was transpiring, I didn't want to linger to find out. I picked up my pace significantly, finally reaching the more populated area where all the houses stood. However, the feeling of unease persisted, like I was still alone, or maybe that I wasn't alone at all. Eventually, I returned to my townhouse, unsure if that walk had alleviated my stress as I'd hoped, but relieved to be away from the ominous woods and whoever had been screaming. I sauntered into the kitchen for some water and a snack, then sat at the table for a moment to steady my breathing. That's when I heard a rustling sound echo from outside my front door, followed by a series of heavy knocks. My heart raced as I stood from the table, silently creeping toward the door. I pressed my ear against it to listen, then peeked out. The porch light was off, and the night was nearly pitch black, so all I could make out was a shadowy figure standing there. After a few seconds of peering, it struck me that the person was definitely dressed in dark clothing. I was almost convinced it was the same man I had seen during my earlier walk. He had followed me home. I quickly pulled out my phone, backed away slightly, and called 911, keeping my voice low. To be honest, I hoped he would remain out there long enough for the cops to arrive, wanting to get some answers because I was genuinely beginning to doubt the screams I heard in the woods. The man continued knocking 5 or 6 times as I spoke on the phone, and then there was a sudden silence. Eventually, I returned to the door to check, and he was gone. When the police arrived, they ran through the standard questions, but nothing definitive came out of it. I mentioned the screams, and while they acknowledged it was unusual, they didn't probe further. That night, I'm pretty sure I didn't sleep at all. Although that was mostly the end of my unusual experiences, over the following month, I kept waking up to the sound of knocking at my front door. These loud, unnerving knocks happened repeatedly, but each time I rushed down to look, there was never anyone there. It's been some time since that last occurrence, but a lingering feeling of paranoia remains. I still have no idea what transpired in that wooded area, who was screaming, or what the man's intentions were. All I can ascertain is that my instincts tell me I came too close to something dreadful that night. Story 2 by Patrick G.A. Few years back, I was working as a Lyft driver. Although I also did Uber, Lyft was far more popular in my town, so that's where I focused my efforts. Given the freedom of the job, I never really adhered to a schedule. At that time, being in my mid-20s, late nights with friends or whatever else would often keep me up later than I should. This led to me being awake for long shifts that continued on into the night. This particular night began just like any other. I clocked in around 11 p.m., completed a couple of drop-offs before getting my next pickup. Given the late hours, I couldn't afford to be too choosy with the ride requests I accepted. I was usually one of the very few drivers operating at that time, and the number of people needing rides was pretty minimal. If I refused a single request or let one pass me by, it would cost me. So I was almost operating on autopilot. Every time I received a request, I instantly accepted and headed in that direction, only checking the details afterward, like how far away they were or the drop-off point. It didn't matter much, as 99% of the time, I was simply picking someone up from a party, bar, or office after hours. Thus, when a request came in, I did what I always did, accepted it, and headed toward the designated pickup point. About 10 minutes into the drive, I realized the route was taking me in a direction that felt off, far away from the main town square, where all the stores and offices were. I checked the map and found the location was a little unusual. Being behind the wheel, I couldn't examine it too closely, but the few quick glances I had taken made it clear that there wasn't much out there. I thought it was odd, but I didn't consider canceling the ride. I reached the destination roughly 15 minutes later, my clock reading about 1 or 2 a.m. By that point, the location matched the foot of my map, a completely isolated area, completely devoid of life. There were neither houses nor side roads nor any trails. I figured maybe the guy's car had broken down, but there was no sign of a vehicle or even other people in sight. I pulled over and sent a notification to the customer, waiting for a response. After some time and feeling increasingly uneasy, I decided to cancel the request and move on. It was frustrating to waste time like that, but sometimes that's just the nature of the job. I began driving back toward the town center, knowing that's where I'd more likely get additional requests. Just 5 minutes after starting back, I received another order. This one originated from nearly the exact same spot I had just been at, perhaps just a mile farther down the road. Although that raised some red flags for me, it didn't seem suspicious in my line of work. There'd be times when something went awry with the location, leading the customer to reorder right away. Typically, the location would resolve itself for a smoother experience the second time around. I wasn't sure why the customer hadn't replied to my previous messages, but I shrugged it off and accepted the order, relieved that my trip wouldn't be entirely wasted. I turned around and retraced my path, passing the previous location before driving another mile further. Again, the road was empty, bordered by sparse forests on either side. However, this time as I pulled up to the new spot, I saw a man standing on the edge of the road. He was clad in ordinary jeans and a gray hoodie, and he had a backpack or duffel bag slung across his shoulder. When I parked in front of him, I glanced behind, puzzled by where he might have come from. There were no houses or traces of any settlement nearby, making me wonder about how he'd gotten there and what he was doing. The man opened my door and climbed in. His drop-off destination was merely 5 minutes down the road. I hoped it would be at a location that made more sense, but from the looks of it, it appeared as barren as the place I picked him up from. During the drive, he remained silent in the back seat, but I could feel him staring at me. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, his gaze seemed locked onto me. An unsettling tension developed in the car, and with how odd the situation already felt, my mind began to spiral. Why were we out there? Where had he come from? What was in the duffel bag? All things I typically wouldn't have bothered to contemplate. A few minutes later, I reached the drop-off point indicated on the map. It mirrored the pickup spot almost perfectly, just as desolate. The silence that filled that moment, combined with that feeling of finality, gave me a horrible sensation. Before I processed my thoughts, he instructed me to get out of the car. I looked back in surprise to confirm what I had just heard, and found him pointing a gun directly at me, with a chilling, vacant expression as he reiterated his command. I had no choice but to comply. I exited the vehicle and he followed close behind me, instructing me to walk. He remained several feet back to prevent any sudden moves. I walked off the road and into the tree line. Fear overwhelmed me, and I made desperate attempts to communicate, utterly terrified for my life. The man, however, stayed silent, showing no sign of remorse for his chilling actions. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the trees thickened and darkness descended. Time felt like it was moving at an odd speed during this encounter, but I estimate we walked for about 10 minutes deeper into the forested area. Suddenly, he ordered me to stop. I sensed my end was near, feeling like I was on the brink of being gone forever. An adrenaline rush surged through me, and I decided to seize the chance and flee deeper into the trees. He yelled for me to stop again, but I kept sprinting. I used the shadows to my advantage, hoping that since he had dragged me deep into the woods, he'd struggle to see me once I distanced myself. I was aware of him hot on my trail, his voice relentlessly pursuing me, and then suddenly, the sound of a gunshot rang out. The shot echoed through the forest, and the ensuing silence was deafening. That was it. He was no longer chasing me. I thought he must have shot in a moment of rage or right to frighten me, knowing I had made my escape. At that point, I began walking in whatever direction I could. My phone was, of course, still in the car, leaving me to fend for myself. After some time, I stumbled upon a small road lined with a few houses, and I was fortunate enough to flag down a man who answered and helped me. When officers arrived to search the area, they discovered my car and everything inside was missing. I didn't believe this was a mere robbery. I'm not even sure what his initial intentions were. Unfortunately, they couldn't find any clues to track him down. The account he used on the app turned out to be another dead end. I continued working as a driver for a few more months, but during that time, I received several more requests nearby the location where everything had happened. Each time I alerted the authorities, but they consistently arrived only to find nobody there. Eventually, I realized I had become too suspicious and paranoid about the incident, prompting me to seek a different job. Story 3, by Anonymous. It was a rainy weekend in my area, and I spent the entire day indoors. I had a strange fondness for rainy days. They justified my laziness and allowed me to indulge in my lack of productivity during my days off. I think it was Sunday when I felt unusually fatigued. Perhaps I hadn't slept well the night before. Regardless, I ended up just lounging on the couch all day. When dinner rolled around, I didn't feel like preparing anything for myself. After being cooped up indoors for so long, I decided to go out for a quick drive and grab something from a drive-thru. It was about 10 p.m. and the rain was coming down pretty hard, so there weren't many people on the road. I spent around 20 minutes getting food and headed straight back home. As I pulled up to my house, however, I noticed it was unusually conspicuous. The fog and rain obscured visibility, and with every other house on the street dark, the single light illuminating my upstairs bedroom window stood out starkly. It struck me as odd because I always turned off the lights before leaving. In fact, I hadn't even gone upstairs at any point that day. But feeling tired and focused on maneuvering in the rain, I didn't dwell on it too much. I brushed it off, not fully comprehending its oddity until I parked and lost sight of it. Once inside, I flicked on the downstairs lights, dropped my food off in the living room, and trudged upstairs to switch off the bedroom light. Upon reaching the upper hallway, my eyes widened and I felt more awake. Not only was the bedroom light off, but none of the upstairs lights were on. All the doors were open, clearly indicating everything was unlit. After a moment of hesitation, I stepped into the room and surveyed my surroundings, unsure of what I was actually looking for. I approached the window and gazed outside at the gloomy weather and dark neighborhood. Perhaps my headlights had created some sort of reflection that made it seem like the light was on. I cursed myself for not inspecting it more closely while I had pulled in. Even a fleeting glance at the window would have instilled more confidence in my previous observation. But now I was unsure how it had been lit up. Just within the 30 seconds it took me to park and head upstairs, it had switched off on its own. Surely it had to be just a glimmer or reflection. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear my weary mind. Retreating downstairs, I plopped onto the couch, opened my food, and started eating while watching television. It's funny. After just 5 minutes, I completely brushed off the thought, quickly forgetting about the strange occurrence as I carried on with my evening. However, I kept waking up. It was like I would doze off for a few minutes, then rouse again, and inexplicably, I felt an unsettling sensation each time. It was as if someone was watching me, prompting me to repeatedly check around the room and over my shoulders. After several times of this happening, it became so intense that I got up to switch on the lights in the room. In the dimness, only the TV provided any illumination. Nonetheless, my efforts to ease my nerves fell flat upon the next instance of waking up. An innately unsettling feeling surged through me. Upon glancing over my shoulder, my eyes fixated on a dark corner of the room, the area leading to the hallway and the staircase. None of the light from the living room extended into that part of the house, rendering it a shadowy void. It was incredibly creepy and contributed to the notion that someone might be watching me. So I got up again to turn on the hallway lights. While I was up, I chose to get ready for bed. I turned off the TV, tidied up the remnants of my dinner, and commenced my ascent upstairs. As I reached the bottom of the staircase, a light clicked off. I hadn't even realized it was on until the sudden darkness enveloped me, but it was unmistakably a light from the upstairs room. An icy dread gripped my stomach, yet for some inexplicable reason I pressed on. My mind raced at how this could possibly be, stubbornly refusing to accept it. Arriving at the top of the stairs, I peeked into the now darkened room, the eerie sounds of rain drumming against the roof, and the moonlight filtering in through the window rendered the situation incredibly uncomfortable. Still, that feeling, the notion that someone was watching me, lingered. A chill coursed through me as I took several cautious steps in, and finally managed to shakily call out, "Hello?" I stepped further, flicking on the light again. As I turned around to see the beam illuminating into the hallway, my recognition from earlier struck again. There was no mistake this time. Yet just as the full realization settled in my mind, something stirred at the edge of my view. It was the closet door. The door creaked open slightly, and through the gap, I recognized a figure staring back at me. Our eyes met for a brief second before he realized he had been seen, then shoved the door fully open and stepped out. Rather than attacking or charging toward me, however, he approached calmly, trying to explain himself and prevent me from fleeing. His smile held a disturbing and unsettling quality. He looked unkempt and almost deranged, yet his demeanor carried an unsettling familiarity, as if he somehow knew me. Before he could close the distance, I bolted back downstairs and fled the house. Fortunately, I still had my phone, enabling me to call the police immediately. But as I stood outside in the rain waiting for them to arrive, I saw the man burst through my front door and dart down the road. When the police arrived, they conducted a brief investigation and discovered the back door was broken. The handle and lock were completely battered, something I had missed since I never utilized that entrance. And when I had encountered him in the room, he hadn't appeared to be soaked, indicating he had probably been inside the entire night while I remained downstairs. Nothing was reported missing, so why he broke in or what he was up to while hiding in the room? Those answers elude me. The light situation haunts me as well. There had to be a reason he kept turning it on. Since that incident, I haven't felt secure. Knowing he's still out there and able to randomly sneak into my home and hide truly troubles me. Hopefully nothing else occurs, but if any other incidents arise, I'll provide updates.